Hello, all you freedom-loving people. President Trump called for the Middle East to unite during his Saudi Arabia visit. He also expects to speak directly with Xi Jinping as talks with China progress. And what is happening in Newark? Okay, let's get into it. Today, President Trump arrived in Riyadh at 9:49 a.m. local time and kicked off his first major overseas trip of his second term. The White House is calling the trip a historic return to the Middle East. From May 13th to May 16th, President Trump will touch down in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, which are three of the most strategically crucial nations in the Middle East. Before arriving, Saudi Arabia escorted President Trump's Air Force One with Saudi F-15 fighter jets. When President Trump arrived in Saudi Arabia for trade talks, he was graciously greeted by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. President Trump was greeted with salutes as the Star-Spangled Banner was played outside the Saudi royal court in Riyadh, and everyone stood as he entered the Saudi royal court. Saudi officials at the royal court in Riyadh also saluted President Trump in a rare show of respect. After being greeted with a king's welcome by the Crown Prince, President Trump signed a series of agreements. With these deals, Saudi Arabia has committed $600 billion in investment across various U.S. sectors, including AI data centers, aerospace, energy infrastructure, defense, and healthcare. And the signing of these deals could result in 2 million jobs in the U.S.
As you know, we have the biggest business leaders in the world here today. They're going to walk away with a lot of checks for a lot of things that you're going to provide. And in the United States, it's probably 2 million jobs that we're talking about this visit. So, number one, I like visiting with you, and we've known each other very well, and I really believe we like each other a lot. And number two, for the United States, we've brought tremendous investment in and tremendous jobs, and we'll continue to service your great country very well.
Scott Bessent and Marco Rubio were also present at the monumental meeting where the two leaders seemed to get along famously. Elon Musk also made a surprise visit. Other top officials and advisors who are traveling with President Trump are Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick and Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, as well as senior aides Susie Wiles and Stephen Miller. One of the first actions of President Trump was to address the Gulf's business elite. He promoted the United States as a prime destination for investment under the new era shaped by his America First agenda. So he attended and spoke at the Saudi-U.S. Investment Forum and made it clear that his 3-day tour of the Middle East would be all about making deals. During his address to the forum, President Trump praised the transformation of Riyadh under the leadership of the Crown Prince, and he called it truly extraordinary. President Trump said that Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations have shifted from oil-dependent economies to diversified industries, including high-tech. To him, this transition would lead to a future in which the region is defined by commerce, not chaos, and exports technology, not terrorism. He also called on the region to unite.
If the responsible nations of this region seize this moment, put aside your differences and focus on the interests that unite you, then all of humanity will soon be amazed at what they will see right here in this geographic center of the world. It really is. It's like a center of the world and the spiritual heart of its greatest faiths.
And he also proposed lifting sanctions on Syria to give the troubled nation a chance to rise.
Likewise, in Syria, which has seen so much misery and death, there is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade. And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week. And very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East. I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
President Trump also turned his attention to Iran as he struck a tough but cordial tone. He described Iran as the biggest and most destructive force in the region, which caused unthinkable suffering in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond. However, President Trump said he would offer the Islamic regime a new path and a much better path toward a far better and more hopeful future.
But with that said, Iran can have a much brighter future, but will never allow America and its allies to be threatened with terrorism or nuclear attack. The choice is theirs to make. We really want them to be a successful country. We want them to be a wonderful, safe, great country. But they cannot have a nuclear weapon. This is an offer that will not last forever. The time is right now for them to choose. Right now, we don't have a lot of time to wait.
President Trump said finally that we are at a pinnacle time where real change is possible.
After so many decades of conflict, finally it is within our grasp to reach the future that generations before us could only dream about, a land of peace, safety, harmony, opportunity, innovation, and achievement right here in the Middle East.
And on his second day in Riyadh, President Trump is expected to attend a summit with the leaders of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which includes Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. President Trump's first trade trip abroad coincides with the improved economics in the U.S. as the Middle East and the rest of the world transition to what President Trump refers to as the Golden Age. The Golden Age has already started as the reports today show that the annual inflation rate declined to 2.3% in April from 2.4% in March. This was even lower than the expectations of economists, and this happened despite tariffs beginning to extend throughout the U.S. economy.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, CPI up 0.2% is a good number. And Mark Tepper, right before the number came out, I imagine oil is down, eggs are down, food is down. We're seeing that reflected. So all that hysteria over tariffs is not showing up in these numbers.
No, not at all.
The U.S. Treasury Department collected $16 billion in tariff revenue in April, which was $9 billion more than in March. This marks a 130% monthly increase. This is the highest monthly revenue for the Customs and Excise Department in at least a decade. Additionally, on an annualized basis, revenues were up 10% and expenditures were down 4% in April compared to 2024. As revenue increases and expenditure decreases, naturally debt decreases accordingly. In numerical terms, the total national debt decreased by $5.5 billion from $26.2 trillion. The Washington Examiner commented that while this is small in the context of a large debt base, focusing on the national debt held by the public, that is, what is financed in the marketplace through Treasury bonds and the like, it's clear that President Trump's second term has indeed reduced federal spending. According to Treasury Department data, from January 20th, 2025, President Trump's inauguration date, to May 5th, the U.S. public holding of the national debt increased by only $37.2 billion. Let's compare this data with the same period in 2024 when Biden was president to see the difference. From January 22nd to May 6, 2024, the American national debt held by the public soared by $478.4 billion. That is, under the window of time, the Trump administration reduced the growth rate of the national debt by a staggering 92%. Even if the actual cuts are small, the trend shift is far-reaching. This suggests that the Trump administration has begun to tighten fiscal discipline. All this is happening even without the trillions of dollars expected to come with President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. If the Trump version of the beautiful bill is passed, Washington's fiscal reorganization will likely take a bigger step forward. House Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee have released the text of a monumental new tax reform package. It is titled the One Big Beautiful Bill. The bill includes a long list of provisions that echo many of the features of the 2017 Trump tax cut. Here are some of the major tax cuts and extensions. It makes the Trump-era tax rate reduction permanent, eliminating the 2025 expiration. It increases standard deductions, and it adds a temporary $1,500 boost for individuals and $1,000 for heads of households through 2028. It boosts the child tax credit from $2,000 to $2,500 per child through 2028. There will be no tax on tips and overtime pay through 2028. It increases the Section 199A small business deduction from 20% to 23% for pass-through business income, and it makes the deduction permanent beyond 2025, and it triples the exemption from $5 million to $15 million that is indexed for inflation. Starting on Wednesday, the U.S. will temporarily lower tariffs on China from 145% down to 30%. However, some of the tariffs will be retained.
Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the largest structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States.
President Trump on Monday explained why the U.S. has dramatically reduced tariffs on Chinese goods. First, he said that Beijing had agreed to open its markets. He emphasized that this commitment was the most important outcome of the high-level trade talks that were held in Geneva, Switzerland last weekend. He added that the U.S. market is open to Chinese imports, but they're not opening their country to us. President Trump has not specified the content and scope of China's liberalization, and these so-called commitments by Beijing have not yet been finalized either. President Trump told the press at the White House before signing the executive order on drug prices. He said, "We have to put it in the agreement, but they have agreed to open up the Chinese market." President Trump says that he plans to speak directly with CCP leader Xi Jinping.
The talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week. We have some other things we're doing.
During the press conference, President Trump also said that the Chinese Communist Party had agreed to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Scott Bessent said, "I think that we saw here in Geneva that the Chinese are now serious about assisting the U.S. in stopping the flow of precursor drugs." A source close to the meeting said that during last Saturday's meeting, Bessent grabbed a handful of sugar from a plate on the table and told the CCP official that if he had grabbed fentanyl, such a small amount would be enough to kill a person. Then he grabbed more and said that this much would be enough to kill all of Switzerland. When Bessent was briefing a small group of reporters, he said that fentanyl was not a major focus of the trade talks, but they were able to discuss the details of the fentanyl issue with such officials as the CCP Public Security Minister Wang Xiaohong. Someone like this is not usually part of a trade team. So Bessent said, "This shows that they are actively responding to our concerns." And President Trump noted that China would be rewarded for helping to stop the fentanyl crisis in the United States. Therefore, they would not have to pay hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. But if the U.S. and China do not reach a formal agreement within 90 days, President Trump said that the tariffs on Chinese goods would go up substantially higher, but they would not go up to 145%. President Trump said at 145%, you're really decoupling because nobody's going to buy. However, Bessent said that the U.S. still wants to decouple from China, just not a full decoupling. But what the U.S. really wants is to decouple the strategic necessities. The tariff cuts decided by the two sides in the Geneva talks did not mention whether to reduce the 125% UF tariff rate on small parcels from China and Hong Kong. However, President Trump signed an executive order that day announcing that the duty rate on small packages would be reduced from 120% to 54%. The CCP also showed goodwill by lifting a month-old ban on local airlines that were not receiving Boeing planes, and Beijing officials started notifying domestic airlines and government agencies this week that deliveries of U.S.-made planes could resume. And the airlines have the freedom to schedule deliveries at their own time and on their own terms. So the 90-day tariff suspension has made China's foreign trade practitioners rejoice. Nearly a month ago, many Chinese foreign trade factories let workers take early vacation, and they began to enter a wait-and-see situation, but now they are finally coming to a turnaround. Some factories have called back their vacationing workers to catch up with the 90-day window. The media reported that the boss of a furniture export factory was the first to reassemble workers after learning of the temporary reduction in tariffs. Since the orders had already fallen off a cliff, they now have to seize the 90-day window to catch up with production. The factory has already activated the 24-hour, 3-shift production mode. Cross-border e-commerce merchants also quickly reached a consensus. They will take advantage of the 90-day tariff window to speed up shipments to the United States and to prepare goods for local warehouses in the U.S. Wang Lin, a cross-border e-commerce merchant, said, "It's a race against time. Whoever can get more goods ready locally in the 90 days will have a bigger advantage if taxes are raised again." With a few words, President Trump put a pause on the conflict between India and Pakistan, so Zelensky also hopes to use President Trump's negotiating skills to reach an agreement with Russia. Zelensky appealed to President Trump on X on Monday. He asked President Trump for his full support and potentially for a visit to Turkey in order to discuss a possible ceasefire deal. He posted, "It's important that President Trump fully supports the meeting, and we would like him to find an opportunity to come to Turkey." At the same time, Zelensky demanded that Putin attend the talks in person because only a face-to-face meeting with the Russian president can deliver peace. This is due to the fact that absolutely everything in Russia depends on Putin. Zelensky also said if he takes the step to say he is ready for a ceasefire, then it opens the way to discuss all of the elements to end the war. The Kremlin also declined to comment on whether Putin will travel to Turkey. They only said that the Russian side continues to prepare for the negotiations. Yesterday, we also mentioned that President Trump expressed optimism about the upcoming talks, and he did not ignore the possibility of attending the meeting by saying, "I even thought about flying over, but I'm not sure where I'll be on Thursday. I have so many meetings." As of now, President Trump's senior envoys, Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg, are confirmed to travel to Istanbul for the talks. So what is happening in Newark? On Friday, the air traffic controllers that direct planes into the airport in Newark, New Jersey, lost their radar for the second time in 2 weeks, and the situation caused the Federal Aviation Administration to issue a temporary ground stop for all flights that were bound for the airport. During this window, Newark Airport air traffic controllers lost all communication with planes. They could not see radar data and they could not hear transmissions from the planes. Everything went dark. The Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, reported that the blackout lasted 30 seconds, while air traffic control unions reported that it was 90 seconds. Actually, and this is not the only time that such an incident has happened. A similar event occurred on a busy afternoon on April 28th with a 30-second lapse in communication between airplanes and control towers at the same airport. Fortunately, during these incidents, no catastrophes occurred, no planes crashed, and no major incidents were reported. On Friday, Duffy said that the facility's equipment was antiquated. and that the software glitch would be fixed soon. Apparently, a copper wire failure is what triggered the problem, and the backup system also failed. To complicate matters, Newark operated only one of its 3 runways, while the others were under construction. Duffy said that the Transportation Department is working on building a new line that runs directly from Newark to Philadelphia's Terminal Radar Approach Control. Duffy hopes to finish the new line by the end of summer. He also offered an upfront bonus to encourage air traffic controllers to stay. This statement was referring to those who are nearing retirement age and who are considering leaving their posts. This is because as a result of the incidents, 5 or 6 controllers, which is around 20% of the staff, took trauma leave. Actually, the union contract does permit them to do so, and so they now have 45 days to seek medical care before returning to work. To solve the problem, Duffy is also supercharging the hiring of young and resilient people into the training academy in order to offset the ongoing shortage of capable air traffic controllers at the agency. Yesterday, Duffy touched upon the problem once again, and he explained what the real problem could be.
Over the last 4 years, the last administration, they knew this was a problem. And by the way, during COVID, when people weren't flying, that was a perfect time to fix these problems. But again, they got $1.2 trillion for infrastructure, and virtually none of it went to fix the biggest American infrastructure problem that we have, which is our air traffic control system. And so what you see in Newark, we're gonna have to fix, we're gonna move fast, but we're gonna do it right. My concern is that we could see other situations like this around the country because the system is old. It's old. And we are fighting to make sure we work with Congress, get the money, and begin this build of a brand new system as quickly as possible.
The Trump administration has also been addressing the infrastructure issue in Newark in conjunction with a parallel story that involves Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. ICE is reopening Delaney Hall, which is an immigration detention facility with 1,000 beds. It's located in the industrial area of Newark Bay. The facility is operated by a private prison company, and it was actually reopened on May 1st. The reopening coincides with the increased effort to deal with illegal migrants and to boost deportation operations. But Ras Baraka, who is the mayor of Newark, argued that the facility lacked the necessary city permits, including a certificate of occupancy. So he appeared multiple times at the site last week, and he tried to gain entry, but he was denied. So, as a result, he was arrested and charged with trespassing after refusing to leave the detention facility on Friday. He was also accompanied by a congressional delegation at the time. According to Alina Habba, who is the New Jersey Attorney General, Baraka committed trespass and ignored multiple warnings from Homeland Security investigations to remove himself from the ICE detention center. He has willingly chosen to disregard the law. That will not stand in this state. He's been taken into custody. No one is above the law. Tricia McLaughlin, who is a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, also criticized Baraka's actions as political antics that endangered ICE personnel, the security of the facility, and the detainees. She also referred to Baraka as a sanctuary mayor due to his support of sanctuary city policies. McLaughlin added, the mayor has been informed that he is more than welcome to enter the facility as long as he follows the security protocols like everyone else. He keeps refusing to do so, presumably in an effort to stage press opportunity to help him in his bid for governor. In fact, Delaney Hall is not the only facility that the Trump administration wants to restore. Alcatraz, which currently could hold 200 people, is also being considered for redevelopment in order to expand the capacity of holding illegal migrants awaiting deportation. There are also plans to reopen North Lake Correctional Facility in Michigan, Midwest Regional Reception Center in Kansas, and another facility in Dublin, California. This is because there should be more facilities in order to keep illegal migrants if there is going to be a need for trials for them. However, the expansion of detention facilities has sparked widespread protests. In Newark, protesters blocked the detention center. Consequently, clashes broke out between federal agents and protesters, and eventually, federal agents arrested some of the protesters.
Guys, excuse me. Let me get his phone. Get my phone. Get my phone. You guys don't move out of the way. Yo, pay attention. Look. Yo, miss. He's not getting his phone. No. Back up. Back up.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after you subscribe. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.